The war in the Pacific was a huge, brutal thing. It covered vast distances, it involved islands, jungles, and endless ocean. For the United States, submarines played a big role. These silent hunters were often deep behind enemy lines. They targeted Japanese ships mostly, supply ships, troop transports, even warships. Their job was to cut off Japan's lifelines. If Japan couldn't get oil, rubber, or food, its war machine would grind to a halt. But submarine life was tough. It was cramped, hot, and dangerous. Patrols lasted months. The subs themselves were wonders of engineering, but they weren't perfect. Early in the war, American torpedoes were famously bad. They often didn't explode, or they ran too deep. This was incredibly frustrating for the crews. They'd line up a perfect shot, hear a dull thud, and nothing. Or worse, the enemy ship would just sail away. But the Navy fixed these problems eventually. They got better torpedoes, and the commanders got more aggressive. The Japanese, on their side, relied a lot on coastal shipping. They moved supplies and troops from island to island, from Korea and China down to the main islands. And they used trains. Trains were vital for moving things on land, especially in places like mainland Asia or the large Japanese islands. Subs usually hunted ships. That was their main target. But sometimes, if a sub was close enough to shore, its deck guns might fire at a train or a coastal factory. It was harassment, mostly. It wasn't their primary mission. Still, the idea of hitting land targets wasn't new. But using a submarine for it was always tricky. A sub's strength was stealth, it could sneak up on ships. But a sub on the surface, firing its deck gun, was vulnerable. It could be seen. It could be attacked by planes or shore batteries, so commanders had to pick their moments carefully. They had to weigh the risk against the potential reward. The Pacific War meant fighting in strange places. Places like the Sea of Okhotsk, off the coast of Sakhalin Island. This was a cold, often ice-choked area. Not somewhere you'd usually think of for a big naval battle, but it was important for Japan. They had coal mines there. They had railways moving those resources. And where there were Japanese resources, there would be American submarines. By late 1944 and early 1945, the U.S. submarine force had become a very effective weapon. They had sunk a lot of Japanese shipping. The Japanese merchant fleet was shrinking fast. This meant fewer targets sometimes. So commanders started looking for other ways to hit the enemy. They were always pushing the limits, always trying to find new weaknesses, and sometimes those weaknesses were not out at sea, but right on the land. This kind of thinking, this aggressive search for targets, led to some incredible acts. It wasn't enough just to sink ships. The mission was to disrupt everything the enemy did, to make life impossible for them, and for some commanders, that meant thinking outside the box. It meant looking at a map and seeing not just the ocean, but the land right next to it, and wondering what could be done there. This created a perfect environment for a unique kind of incident, an incident that would become a legend. The submarine USS Barb was no ordinary boat. It was already famous by early 1945 and had a reputation, and its commander, Captain Eugene Fluckey, was a legend. He was aggressive, smart, and a bit of a maverick. He was known for pushing his crew and his boat to the limit. Barb was on its 12th war patrol. This was a patrol in the Sea of Okhotsk and off the coast of Sakhalin Island. This was a bitterly cold area far north of most U.S. operations, but it was important for Japan. On this patrol, Fluckey was looking for trouble. He had already achieved much success. Barb had sunk several ships, but Fluckey wasn't content. He wanted more. He studied the Japanese coastlines. He noticed how the Japanese were moving coal and supplies by train along the Karafuto coast, what is now Sakhalin Island. These trains were often close to the water, and that got him thinking. Subs often used their deck guns to shell shore targets. Barb had done this before, but deck guns were small, and their shells weren't always effective against a moving train. Plus, firing a deck gun meant the sub had to surface. That was risky. Fluckey wanted something bigger, something more devastating. He wanted to use a torpedo, but how do you hit a train with a torpedo? Torpedoes are designed for water targets. They run at a certain depth. They need clear water to travel. A train runs on tracks, on land. It seemed impossible, but Fluckey was an innovator. He thought about it. He looked at his charts. He found a specific spot near the town of Shiratori, a place where the train tracks ran right along the coast. In some sections, the tracks were very close to the water's edge, even built up on a small embankment. The idea was crazy, but Fluckey shared it with his crew. They loved it. They were used to Fluckey's bold ideas. They were a veteran crew, and they trusted him completely. They started planning. The key was to find the right spot. a spot where a torpedo launched from a submerged submarine could hit the land. And then, hopefully, hit the train tracks. On January 23rd, 1945, Barb found its target. It was a long train loaded with coal moving south. The train was visible from the sub's periscope. It was dark around 2 a.m. The train was running without lights, probably to avoid detection. But the sound was clear. The rumble of the engine, the clatter of the cars. It was a perfect target. Fluckey decided to launch a torpedo from an unusual position. The train was on tracks that ran along a small bluff. The water was shallow there, too shallow for a normal torpedo run, but Fluckey wasn't aiming for the train directly with the torpedo in the water. He had a different plan. He brought Barb close to shore in very shallow water, so close the bottom was almost scraping the keel. He chose a spot where the track was particularly vulnerable. His plan was to fire a torpedo at the land below the tracks. He would detonate it by setting the torpedo to impact the bank, hoping the explosion would cause a landslide. Or, more ambitiously, that the torpedo itself might somehow reach the train if it was close enough to the water's edge on a small promontory or bridge. He picked a Mark 18 electric torpedo. These were slower than the steam torpedoes, but they ran without a wake, which was good for stealth. He set its depth to a very shallow setting. He aimed it not at the train itself, but at a point on the track line at the base of the small embankment. The order was given. The torpedo fired. The crew held their breath. They listened. After a short, tense wait, there was a massive explosion. The sound shook the sub. And then a moment later, the distinct crunching and screeching sound of a train derailing. Through the periscope, Fluckey could see the chaos. The train was a mess. Cars piled up. A huge fire erupted, fueled by the coal. The engineers and crew of the train must have been completely stunned. Barb then quickly moved away. The mission was accomplished. It was an unprecedented act. A submarine had successfully sunk a train, not by conventional means but by a bold, innovative attack. It was a testament to Fluckey's audacity and his crew's skill. This was not just a successful attack, it was a revolution in submarine warfare. The man behind this incredible feat was Captain Eugene B. Fluckey. His name became synonymous with daring and success in the U.S. submarine force. They called him Lucky Fluckey, but it wasn't just luck. It was skill, aggressive tactics, and a deep understanding of his boat and his enemy. Fluckey joined the Navy in 1935. He quickly showed promise. He was smart, detail-oriented, but also had a fiery spirit. He believed in pushing the limits. He didn't just follow the book, he wrote new chapters. Before commanding Barb, he had served on other submarines and gained a reputation for competence. When he took command of USS Barb SS-220 in 1944, the boat already had a good record. But Fluckey elevated it to legendary status. He pushed his crew hard, but he also treated them with respect. He listened to their ideas, he encouraged innovation, he fostered a sense of family and shared purpose. His crew loved him, even though he demanded perfection. They knew he was leading them to victory. Fluckey's leadership style was unique. He was not just a tactician, he was an inspirer. He knew how to get the most out of his men. He instilled confidence. He made them believe that no target was too difficult, no mission too risky if properly planned. He believed in aggressive patrolling. He wouldn't just sit and wait for targets, he would hunt them down, often going into waters previously considered too dangerous or too shallow. The USS Barb itself was a Gatto-class submarine. These were workhorses of the fleet. They were fast, heavily armed, and had good endurance. But what made Barb special was its crew and its commander. They had a high morale, a strong bond. They had already completed many successful patrols under Fluckey's command. They sank many ships, earning a Presidential Unit citation. They were veterans, hardened by combat, but still eager for action. Life aboard a submarine was tough. Long patrols meant months away from home. Close quarters meant little privacy. The constant threat of depth charges, air attacks, and naval patrols meant living with fear. The smell of diesel, sweat, and cooking food lingered in the air. But Fluckey kept his crew motivated. He often shared the credit for successes. He made sure they were well fed and had some recreation when possible. The Train Buster mission perfectly shows Fluckey's genius. It wasn't just about sinking a target. It was about thinking differently. It was about seeing an opportunity where others saw an impossible problem. How do you hit a train on land with a weapon designed for sea? Most commanders would dismiss the idea out of hand. But Fluckey chewed on it. He thought about the engineering. He thought about the geography. He found a way. The crew's willingness to follow such a risky and unusual plan speaks volumes about their trust in Fluckey. They had to navigate their submarine into incredibly shallow, unfamiliar waters. They were exposed to potential Japanese defenses, but they believed in their captain. They knew he wouldn't put them in harm's way without a sound plan. Fluckey's daring wasn't limited to the train incident. He once took Barb into a Japanese harbor, surfaced, and used his deck guns to shell enemy installations. A submarine in a heavily defended harbor on the surface blazing away. That was Fluckey. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for his incredible exploits during that specific patrol, which included the train attack. His actions embodied the spirit of the American submarine force: courage, ingenuity, and relentless aggression. He showed that with the right leadership, a submarine could be an even more versatile and devastating weapon than anyone imagined. After the massive explosion and the chaos of the derailed train, USS Barb made its getaway. The sub slipped silently back into deeper water. The crew was elated. They had pulled off something truly unprecedented. But the real challenge often came after the action, proving it. When Barb returned to base, Captain Fluckey had to write his patrol report. He detailed all the ships sunk, the damage done, and then he included the attack on the train. The report undoubtedly raised some eyebrows back at headquarters. A submarine sank a train with a torpedo on land? It sounded like something out of a pulp fiction novel, not a naval war report. Verifying such an unusual claim wasn't easy. Submarines often relied on visual confirmation through periscopes, sound recordings, and crew testimony. For sinking a ship, there were often oil slicks, debris, or survivors to confirm. But a train on land? That was different. The primary evidence was the eyewitness accounts of the entire bridge crew, who had observed the explosion and derailment through the periscope. They described the huge fire, the wreckage. Their testimony was consistent, and Fluckey was a highly respected commander. His word carried weight. Further confirmation, though not immediate, came later. Post-war intelligence and analysis of Japanese records helped to corroborate the attack. While the Japanese likely didn't report a submarine sunk train directly, they would have documented the loss of a vital coal train and the damage to the railway line in that area at that specific time. This kind of cross-referencing often happened after the war, piecing together the full picture from both sides. The engineering feat was also discussed. How could a torpedo, designed for water, work on land? The Mark 18 electric torpedo was a key part of the success. It had a magnetic detonator, but it could also be set for contact detonation. Fluckey likely set it to run very shallow and hit the base of the embankment, causing a massive explosion that would destroy the tracks and derail the train. The impact on the ground would have been enough to detonate the powerful warhead. The sheer force of the explosion was what caused the damage. It wasn't about the torpedo hitting the train directly, but about the explosion ripping up the ground under it. The attack was officially recognized. It was a major point in the citation for Captain Fluckey's Medal of Honor, which he received for the entire patrol, highlighting his extraordinary valor and leadership. The Presidential Unit Citation awarded to USS Barb also specifically mentioned the unprecedented land attack. Strategically, the impact of sinking one train wasn't war-winning, but it was significant in other ways. It disrupted Japanese logistics. It showed that even their land-based supply lines near the coast were vulnerable. It forced them to commit resources to repair and defend these lines, distracting them from other areas. It also had a huge psychological impact. It demonstrated the sheer audacity and reach of the American submarine force. The Japanese must have been bewildered by how a submarine could achieve such a feat. The train-buster incident, along with Barb's other aggressive actions, contributed to Japan's growing sense of isolation and vulnerability. Their shipping was decimated, their air force was weakened, and now even their trains on land weren't safe. It hammered home the point that the Americans were everywhere, and they would attack anything they could. The immediate aftermath for Barb's crew was one of immense pride. They had done something no other sub-crew had ever done. It added to their boat's already legendary status. It solidified Fluckey's reputation as one of the most innovative and successful submarine commanders of the war. It became a story told and retold within the submarine community, a testament to pushing boundaries and achieving the impossible. The confirmation might not have been instant, but the evidence, both human and circumstantial, was strong enough for the Navy to fully accept and honor this incredible event. The story of the USS Barb sinking a train is more than just a footnote in history. It's a legend. It has endured for decades, told and retold, because it perfectly captures the daring spirit of World War II submariners. It's not just about sinking a train, it's about what that act represented. This incident, above all else, highlights human ingenuity and courage. In Captain Fluckey and his Crew didn't just follow orders, they looked for new ways to fight. They were faced with a situation where traditional targets were scarce, but the enemy still had vulnerabilities. Instead of giving up or simply doing less, they invented a new tactic. They challenged the very definition of what a submarine could do. That kind of out-of-the-box thinking is something people always remember. The USS Barb's overall record was incredible. It was one of the highest scoring submarines of the war, but the train incident stands out. Now, it's unique. It's something people find hard to believe even today. It makes you ask, could that really happen? And the answer is yes, because a group of determined men decided to make it happen. The story has found its way into books, documentaries, and naval lore. It's a standard tale told to new submariners. It teaches them that innovation and boldness are as important as technical skill. It reminds them that sometimes the greatest victories come from taking calculated risks and thinking beyond the obvious. In a broader sense, the legacy of the Trainbuster is about the human element in warfare. It shows that technology alone isn't enough. It's how people use that technology, how they adapt, and how they push its limits. A submarine is a complex machine, but it's the men inside who make it legendary. Fluckey's ability to inspire his crew, to make them believe in the impossible, is a testament to his leadership. The incident also represents a shift in wartime strategy. By 1945, the war was nearing its end. Japan's main fleet was crippled. Its merchant marine was decimated. But the U.S. military, and especially its submarine force, didn't ease up. They continued to find new ways to press the attack, to put pressure on the enemy, even in unexpected places. This relentless aggression contributed to the final victory. Today, if you visit a naval museum or read about World War II submarines, the USS Barb and Captain Fluckey's name often come up. The image of a submarine, normally a hunter of ships beneath the waves, firing a torpedo at a train on land, is just too powerful to forget. It's a story that defies expectations. It shows that even in the rigid structure of military operations, there's room for brilliance and a bit of madness. So, did a U.S. submarine sink a train during WWII? Yes, it absolutely did. The USS Barb, under Captain Eugene Fluckey, launched a torpedo that derailed and destroyed a Japanese train on January 23, 1945. It was a singular act of audacity, ingenuity, and pure guts. It remains one of the most fascinating and iconic stories of the war, a lasting symbol of the relentless, innovative spirit of the American fighting man. It's a legend that continues to inspire and amaze, reminding us that sometimes the most improbable actions lead to the most memorable achievements.